Hi there, Miss Sam's here. Finally, we have arrived to the last section, communication in the biology IA. So let's get started. Okay, so this is just a very quick reminder as to the key things. Okay, so for example, because you only have 12-page limits, so you do not need a cover page, you do not need a content page. Okay, and then I would like to ask students to standardize their headers. Okay, so make sure all the page contain their names in case the staple was loosened. Okay, so top right header should include your name and your personal code. And when you submit the final draft, then you should remove your name and just keep the personal code. But for when you're writing a first draft, then perhaps you can put it in there. And then always useful to include the page number at the bottom right. Okay, you can place it in the footer. Okay, and then in terms of language, because we are looking into communication, so this is actually more uh, in the nature of writing a lab report. So we expect formal language. So such as you should avoid no, you should avoid apostrophe. Okay, so don't just write oh I didn't, it shouldn't, etc. And also you need to have an indicator of where you use your reference. So for example perhaps some of you will use footnotes, okay, so to show where you use your reference. Sometimes students' bibliography is missing, so yes. One more interesting thing was reported from the examiner is that, for example, if you've taken a photograph and then you label it, okay, so for example, experiment setup and things like that, at the bottom of it, you need to mention that, oh, okay, photograph taken by the candidate, okay, so you need to quote this as well, okay, so yeah. All right, so again, you can pause this video and then have a closer look, read this page, but I just want to highlight a few things there. So a few things that just now we mentioned, no need for cover page, no need for content page, okay? And then about the graph, okay, about the graph, we also mentioned in previous video, generally speaking, you should only have one graph per lab report, okay? You shouldn't have more than one graph. The reason why they say the examiner says that it not only is save space because you only have 12-page limit, it also helps to improve your comparison, okay? So yeah, and also generally speaking for the graph, okay, try to avoid squash graph. Recommendation from IB is that the graph is at least half a page big, okay? So yes, squash graph, okay, so very hard to read, okay? So yeah, and then again, this one is from previous video saying that you need to have a functionable header. So three things in the header: the labels, okay, very clear as to what it is, the unit, and also the uncertainty, okay? Right. Okay, so a few more. So scientific names. Okay, so you need to include the binomial names in, for example, in your research questions. Okay, but make sure the format is correct. So when you write the binomial name, first of all, it must be italic. Okay, it must be presented in italic, and then the genus is in capital and the species is in small letters. Okay, so yeah, so that's the idea. Units missing. Okay, uncertainty sometimes missing. Okay, so this will be, put it this way, it will be penalized twice. It will be penalized in the analysis part, it will be penalized in the communication part. So you really want to avoid that. So make sure your unit is correct, okay, and also your uncertainty. Here also mentioned about the non-metric units. So for example, you shouldn't be using mu, instead you should be using cm3. Okay, and then decimal place being irregular, again it will be penalized in the communication part as well as in the analysis part. Okay, so what is the examiner looking for? Okay, so for several parts, okay, so related to communication. One is first of all the presentation, the layout, okay, the layout. So first of all, it would be good, okay, although we don't need a cover page, it would be always a good idea to place your research question right at the start. So research question present early on, and then graph and diagram size and proportion. So don't make the graph too small, okay, it must be clear enough. The table, okay, table conventions. So for example, if your table need to split across 2 pages, a reminder, you need to place the header on the second page as well. Citation must be very clear as to footnotes, endnotes, things like that. And the next one, structure-wise, logical sequence. So for example, you have your introductions, okay, then you have your list out your IVDV and then CV in terms of the table, and then for example, apparatus list, okay, method, safety and stuff like that, and so on. Okay, so we've mentioned all this in the previous video. And then essential information and ambiguity. So make sure what you proofread your work. So basically, in the past, we have seen students have done, because they have modify the IA in many versions. So sometimes the statement could be contradict or not very clear. So make sure you check, okay, check whether the content makes sense, okay. One way to avoid ambiguity is that you need to be careful of how you use the pronoun. So a lot of students, they refer the items as it or something like that, and then it's very unclear as to what they are referring to. So it's best to say, oh, the green tea is more antimicrobial than I don't know, ginger, okay, things like that. So or shouldn't be writing, like, for example, things like, oh, it is stronger than tea, okay, but we don't know what it you are referring to. So that is the ambiguity that we're talking about. It's not clear. So one way to solve is beware of the pronoun that you're using. Okay, unnecessary use of appendix. Okay, so in the previous video we've mentioned already, is examiners are assessing whether the candidate has the ability to screen out some non-useful data. So if you have the ability to screen out non-useful data, then you won't have unnecessary use of appendix. And of course, you need to have a bibliography. Make sure you do it in an MLA format, okay? And it's MLA format throughout the content. All right, and then other thing else, for example, repetitions in discussion. So yes, there's some parts that's overlap, but do not just copy directly from, for example, let's say you're copying the theory directly from the introduction, and then when you put it back into the conclusion, do not do that. Okay, try to rephrase it a little bit. Tabulation, so make sure your header is very clear, decimal place, all that. Unnecessary graph, we've mentioned it already, so in theory should be one graph only. Over large graph is also could be penalized, okay? So again, so you need to watch out for the layout. We recommend half a page. Irrelevant materials, sometimes this happens when students are discussing in the introduction or background. So watch out what you are referring to, and don't put too much focus on the things that is not too related to your experiment. Again, and the next one is overrun the 12-page limit when it could be avoided. Okay, so again, reminder that for biology IA, you have a 12-page limit. So that's about it. I hope this video helps you through. If you have any questions, feel free to comment in the video down below. So that's it. Add oil, good luck, and thank you. Bye bye.